The president said, Dinesh, you've been a great voice for freedom. And he said that, I got to tell you, man to man, you've been screwed. He goes, I've been looking at the case. I knew from the beginning that it was fishy. But he said upon reviewing it, he felt a great injustice had been done and that using his power, he was going to rectify it, sort of clear the slate.
I got to tell you, man to man, I can't speak man to man, but woman to man. I'm pretty sure Dinesh had said he was guilty a couple of years back, so I don't really know how that kind of screwing works. Time for Money, Power, Politics. That, of course, was Dinesh D'Souza, the alt-right commentator who is breathing a big sigh of relief this morning after receiving a full pardon from President Trump. D'Souza was convicted of campaign finance violations in 2014. I want to bring in Midwin Charles, attorney at Midwin Charles Associates, my panel, Brendan Greeley and Senator Bob Torricelli. Midwin, President Trump clearing the slate for Dinesh D'Souza makes the 5th pardon since the president took office. I know there are parts of the White House, i.e. Jared Kushner's side of the house, that has been working on prison reform. They thought with Kim Kardashian's visit this week, we might see a woman who's been in jail for the last 22 years, still serving a life sentence for a nonviolent drug crime. She might get pardoned, but alas, no. Dinesh D'Souza, Martha Stewart, and maybe Blago. What do you make of the way the president is using his pardoning power, which, again, it's his power to do it?
Well, there are two things. One, I think it sort of is, he's basically sending a message. Politically, I think, when you look at the people that he has pardoned, Joe Arpaio as well, you have to add to the list. Joe Arpaio,
and I should correct myself, Blago is in consideration.
Is in consideration, right? And Dinesh D'Souza, who pled guilty for illegal campaign violations. I think what he's doing is sending a message to those who are currently under the scope of Mueller to say, hey, listen, if you have my back, I'll have your back. Because, I mean, this is foreshadowing, right? And if you look at Blagojevich, for example, he's also someone who was convicted of pay for play. And those are some of the crimes that his attorney, Michael Cohen, is looking at, and the like. But if you also look at the Dinesh D'Souza pardon as well as Joe Arpaio, both those men are on the record for saying racist things. And what I think is the most dangerous about these pardons is it sends this message that what these men have done is okay. Joe Arpaio was convicted for violating an order where he was told not to discriminate against migrants or immigrants in Arizona. He did it anyway. Dinesh D'Souza called President Obama a monkey, said Michelle Obama looked like an ape, and I mean a long record of racist statements, and yet he pardons him. Also, what's dangerous about this, or I think very unusual, is once again, Donald Trump is skirting or flouting our norms. I checked the DOJ website for how pardons are supposed to go. Usually someone makes a petition, usually they have to wait 5 years, and the Department of Justice is very clear in saying, by the way, if you get a pardon, this does not connote innocence. It means that you have accepted responsibility for what you've done. So I hope Dinesh D'Souza recognizes that he isn't innocent just because he's getting a pardon.
I don't think he particularly cares about that. He's just happy that the president just hooked him up. Senator, pardons have worked that way for years and years. Presidents hooking people up in some cases for various reasons. But I want to share what Michael Beschloss, presidential historian, said on why he thinks Trump is handling pardons the way he is.
This is sort of classic Trump. I think he's trying to numb people so that if he does these strange pardons, then if he goes on to Cohen and Manafort and people who can actually do real harm to him, unless they are pardoned, perhaps people will be a little bit more tolerant even.
So, Senator, Michael's saying, you know, in a sense, president's sending out a whistle to Michael Cohen like, I love you, man, I got your back.
Yeah, I don't think Donald Trump cares about Blagojevich or Martha Stewart or any of these people or their cases or justice or fairness. This is all a telegraph. My guess is that Trump meets every afternoon with Rudy or his team of lawyers to talk about the state of the case. If I were Rudy Giuliani this afternoon, I would have Article 1, Paragraph 9 of the Articles of Impeachment of Richard Nixon in my pocket, and I'd hand it to him. Because in Paragraph 9, it is using the powers to convince people, to persuade people, influence people not to cooperate, not to be truthful, and to evade justice. He is setting up a case against himself. Rudy needs to restrain him from further self-destruction in this case.
Okay.
This is not helping.
Brendan, James Comey is the one who went after Martha Stewart. Blago, the former Illinois governor, he was also taken down by Comey and Mueller. And his wife was asked whether she thought the president's consideration had anything to do with that. And I want to share what she said.
I see that these same people that did this to my family, these same people that, you know, secretly taped us and twisted the facts and perverted the law that ended up my husband in jail, you know, these same people are trying to do the same thing that they did to my husband, just on a much larger scale. You know, they were emboldened. They took down a governor, and now they've got their sights much higher.
All right, and it's not just Comey and Mueller. Preet Bharara was the prosecutor who was behind D'Souza's conviction. So what do you make of this pattern?
I think there's something, I'm fascinated by the word pattern, because it's like we're all in a basement. We've got yarn going from face to face, and we're trying to make the connections, and we're putting together this spider work of connections. All these connections are valid. I think that Midwin has a point. I think the senator has a point. I think there's something else in addition to this, which is that...
You all just called us crazy right there.
I'm crazy. I'm trying to dig into this, but there's one other layer of crazy that I'd like to put on top of this, which is that there's an arbitrariness to some of this, which feels like an exercise of power. One of the ways in which you exercise power is that you say, I have the power to do it no matter what. I don't need reasons. You don't have to find patterns. I am the state. I make these decisions.
I know. It's not coincidence that these are Comey cases and Fitzpatrick cases. I don't think it's very subtle, and it doesn't seem arbitrary to me.
It's not like Martha Stewart needs to get pardoned.
Right, and also if you look at the underlying crimes for which these people were convicted, lying to the FBI, Martha Stewart, Blagojevich, pay for play. You know, if you look at all of those underlying crimes, those are exactly the same crimes that Manafort is looking at, Michael Cohen is looking at. So not only is this a message to them to say, hey, listen, I have your back, but it also lessens the sting so that you know, if these men are convicted of these crimes or whatever, you know, it's not that big a deal.
I don't know if it lessens the sting or if it prepares all of us. So we're saying, Mr. President, we see you, and we're watching you do it now, and we'll watch when you want to do it down the line.
And part of the discrediting of Comey and Fitzpatrick and the rest of DOJ.
Yeah, does it really discredit him? Does the average person on the street say, well, who was it who went after Martha Stewart? Like, is Louise Ruhle thinking about that? I don't think so.
But it's building blocks. It's more of what has been a sustained campaign of undermining the credibility, part of which these people undermine their own credibility. Comey is his own worst enemy. I think when the history of this is written, Comey will be if Donald Trump survives this and wins the public opinion post-report by Mueller, Comey will be a big part of having destroyed this case. So he didn't need help in his destruction. But Trump, nevertheless, I think this is thought through, and it is part of discrediting justice generally.
I agree. And it's systemic. It's systemic. And when you take that and you add along his tweets, you add along Giuliani's appearances, it's all systemic to undermine all of it.
There's a lot to take on. It's Friday. Can we end on a high note soon? All right, coming up, a growing movement with